High in the mountains between ancient China, India, and Persia, a forgotten kingdom once controlled the roads that connected half the known world. Its rulers moved gold, silk, religions, and ideas across continents, yet their empire nearly vanished from history. Who were the Kushans, and how did displaced nomads become masters of the ancient Silk Road? Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy forgotten civilizations, ancient mysteries, and lost worlds. The wind arrives first. It races down from the Hindu Kush, carrying dust across stone valleys. Below the passes, rivers spill toward green pockets of farmland. Mud brick towns cling to their banks, and narrow roads vanish into horizons that lead toward 4 different worlds. To the east lies the domain of Hanchina. To the south, beyond the Indus, stretch the plains of India. Westward stand the Iranian lands and the routes to Mesopotamia. Far beyond them waits the Mediterranean, where Roman merchants prize silk they cannot produce and spices from countries they barely understand. Here, in the ground between those civilizations, a kingdom will rise whose rulers speak through coins, ruined temples, scattered inscriptions, and the testimony of outsiders. Its name is Kushan, but before it becomes an empire, the landscape itself prepares the stage. The phrase Silk Road can make this world sound like a single highway, a road joining Rome to China. Nothing in the terrain is so simple. The routes form a shifting web of tracks, river crossings, desert margins, mountain corridors, and seasonal alternatives. Caravans do not travel from one end of Eurasia to the other. Goods pass through many hands. Silk may leave China with one group of merchants, be exchanged in an oasis, carried over another range by different traders, taxed by a local ruler, stored for months, and sold again before it reaches a Western market. A bolt of cloth can travel farther than its carriers. Ideas move in the same broken way, altered at every stop. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because the story waiting in these mountains is not simply about trade. It is about what happens when a people learns to control the spaces between more famous empires. At the center of this world lies Bactria, an ancient region spanning parts of what are now northern Afghanistan, southern Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. Its geography is deceptive. From a distance it appears enclosed by deserts and mountains, a remote edge of the civilized world. On the ground, it is a hinge. The Oxus River, known today as the Amudarya, nourishes fields, settlements, and corridors of movement. Routes lead west toward Iranian cities, north into the steppe, east through high passes toward the Tarim Basin and China, and south across the Hindu Kush toward Gandhara and the Indus. Whoever holds Bactria does not command every caravan in Asia, but can influence several of the most valuable channels through which people and goods must pass. This is not empty frontier land. Long before the Kushans appear, Bactria has already been absorbed into vast political systems. Achaemenid Persian kings claim it. Alexander the Great fights his way through it, discovers how difficult its resistance can be, and leaves Greek and Macedonian settlers behind. After his death, Hellenistic rulers govern cities where Greek language and artistic forms mingle with older Iranian traditions. Farther south, Indian powers shape the borderlands. In the markets, one might encounter Greek-style coins, Iranian religious customs, Indian luxury goods, steppe horses, and Chinese silk. No single label fully captures the population. Farmers, herders, soldiers, craftsmen, administrators, priests, and merchants live within overlapping worlds. The mountains do more than divide these communities, they funnel them. A pass can be closed by winter snow, threatened by raiders, or controlled by a fortress placed at the right bend. Water matters as much as weapons. A caravan needs wells, grazing, food, guides, pack animals, and places where damaged equipment can be repaired. Control of movement therefore depends on relationships with villages and oasis towns as much as on armies. A ruler who protects merchants, standardizes payments, and limits predation can become wealthy without manufacturing the goods that create that wealth. A ruler who taxes too heavily may simply push traffic toward another route. Power here requires calculation, patience, and an understanding of geography. It also requires tolerance for uncertainty. Scholars still debate the reach of many ancient states in this region, partly because boundaries were rarely fixed lines resembling those on modern maps. Authority could be strongest around cities and river valleys, then weaken into tribute, alliance, or nominal loyalty in the mountains. A king might claim a territory that he could enter only during certain seasons. Coins can indicate trade, conquest, political prestige, or all three. Ruins show where people built, but not always whom they obeyed. What survives in the records suggests a landscape of layered power rather than clean borders. That complexity helps explain why the Kushans can later become influential and yet remain absent from popular memory. They do not fit comfortably into a history told as separate stories of China, India, Persia, Greece, and Rome. They belong to all those stories without being contained by any of them. Their future empire will use scripts derived from Greek, issue coins bearing deities from several religious traditions, support Buddhist institutions, command routes through Iranian and Indian cultural zones, and draw wealth from exchanges reaching far beyond its borders. Under Kushan rule, northwestern India and adjoining regions will participate in both maritime commerce and overland trade toward China. Yet none of that is inevitable. At this moment, the corridors are unstable, Hellenistic kingdoms have fractured, steppe confederations compete across the north, Chinese expansion is reshaping the eastern routes, local rulers hold valleys that can be lost within a generation, merchants continue moving because danger does not erase profit, it merely raises the price. Along the roads come lacquerware, metal vessels, textiles, spices, gemstones, glass, ivory, horses, medicines, and stories about distant courts. Monks and envoys travel beside traders. Languages overlap in crowded settlements. Every object carries traces of several journeys. Beyond the eastern horizon, another movement has already begun. A displaced people is being forced away from its homeland by enemies stronger than itself. It does not yet possess the empire it will one day command. It is divided, mobile, and searching for security. The people who will become the Kushans are approaching Bactria not as masters of the Silk Roads, but as survivors driven westward through a world in motion. And when they enter these river valleys, they will find more than a refuge. They will find the crossroads of ancient Eurasia. They come from the east under pressure, not triumph. Long before the Kushans mint gold coins or sponsor monasteries, their ancestors belonged to a larger confederation remembered in Chinese records as the Yuezhi. Their earliest homeland is usually placed somewhere in the broad frontier zone of northwestern China, perhaps around the Gansu corridor and the lands approaching the Tarim Basin. The exact boundaries remain uncertain. Because steppe peoples rarely leave behind the kinds of documents later historians prefer, their world is recorded mainly by enemies, neighbours, and officials who see them from beyond fortified borders. What survives in the records suggests a mobile society skilled in animal husbandry, long-distance movement, mounted warfare, and exchange across the dry landscapes between agricultural China and the inner Asian steppe. The Gansu corridor is a narrow geographical passage squeezed between mountains and desert. It offers one of the most practical routes connecting the Chinese heartlands with Central Asia. Whoever moves through it can reach oasis settlements, grazing grounds, and the chain of roads that eventually opens toward the west. For pastoral peoples, this is not merely a road, it is a living zone of water, pasture, trade, tribute, and conflict. Control can shift quickly, alliances form and break. A confederation that appears dominant in one generation may be scattered in the next. The Yuezhi seem to have been powerful enough to trouble their neighbours and wealthy enough to attract attention. Later traditions connect them with the trade in jade, horses, and other valuable materials, although the evidence remains incomplete. Their strength probably rests not on a centralized kingdom in the later imperial sense, but on cooperation between clans and chiefs whose loyalty depends on success. Such political systems can expand rapidly, but they are vulnerable when defeat damages the prestige holding them together. That defeat comes from the Yongnu, a formidable steppe confederation rising along China's northern frontier. During the 2nd century BCE, the Xiongnu attack the Yuezhi and overturn the balance of power across the region. Chinese accounts describe the conflict in stark terms. A Yuezhi ruler is killed, and his skull is said to have been made into a drinking vessel. The detail may reflect the language of humiliation used in ancient political storytelling, but it captures the scale of the disaster. This is not a minor territorial loss. It is a blow severe enough to send much of the Yuezhi population westward. Migration on this scale is not a single column moving neatly across a map. It unfolds over years. Families, herds, warriors, dependents, craftsmen, and captives travel at different speeds. Some groups remain behind. Others break away. Livestock must find pasture, and children must survive cold nights, disease, and hunger. Wagons fail. Rivers flood. Rival communities resist newcomers. Every stop carries the possibility of settlement, conflict, or further displacement. The people moving west are not crossing empty land. They are entering territories already occupied by other pastoral groups and oasis societies, each with its own alliances and fears. The first major region they reach is the Ili Valley and the lands around the eastern edge of the Central Asian steppe. Here, the Yuezhi encounter another people known as the Saka, part of the wider world of Iranian-speaking steppe communities often called Scythians in Western sources. The Yuezhi push some of these groups south and west. Displacement creates more displacement. Saka populations move toward Bactria, Iran, and the northwestern regions of the Indian subcontinent, where they will establish their own kingdoms and leave a lasting political imprint. The future Kushans are therefore not simply victims of migration. They become agents within a chain reaction stretching across thousands of kilometers. But their position in the Ili region is not secure. Another group, the Wusund, rises with Xiongnu support and attacks the Yuezhi. Once again, the migrants are forced onward. The repeated pressure matters because it transforms the political character of the Yuezhi. A confederation that has lost a homeland cannot depend on old boundaries or inherited authority. Leaders must prove they can find pasture, defeat rivals, secure supplies, and guide their followers towards safer territory. Survival favors adaptability. The Yuezhi learn to absorb new people, use unfamiliar routes, and rebuild power after catastrophe. Their westward movement eventually carries them beyond the high mountains into the lands north of Bactria. By this time, they have crossed environments that would challenge any army deserts where water sources are separated by lethal distances, uplands where sudden storms can kill animals, and narrow valleys controlled by local powers. They have also moved through one of the most culturally diverse regions on Earth. Iranian languages dominate many communities, but Greek influence remains strong in cities farther west. Traders bring Chinese goods. Indian religions and artistic traditions approach from the south. The Yuezhi arrive carrying their own customs, but isolation is no longer possible. Chinese observers later describe the Greater Yuezhi as settled north of the Oxus, divided among 5 principal groups or chiefdoms. One of these is called Guishuang, the name from which Kushan is generally understood to derive. At this stage, the Guishuang are not yet rulers of an empire. They are one branch within a broader political arrangement. Each chiefdom likely controls its own followers and territory, while recognizing some degree of shared identity. The structure remains difficult to reconstruct, and scholars still debate how closely Chinese administrative terms correspond to the political reality of the Yuezhi themselves. The change from mobile migrants to regional rulers is gradual. Some Yuezhi communities continue pastoral traditions, moving animals between seasonal grazing grounds. Others settle near rivers and towns. They encounter systems of irrigation, coinage, taxation, urban administration, and monumental building inherited from earlier Bactrian states. The contrast must have been striking. A people repeatedly pushed across the steppe now stands beside cities shaped by Persian and Greek rulers, surrounded by fields sustained through carefully maintained canals. They do not abandon mobility. Instead, they combine it with the wealth of settled land. Their horses, military organization, and networks across the steppe provide advantages that urban elites may lack. The cities offer resources, skilled labor, written administration, and access to long-distance trade. Neither world alone explains what follows. The future Kushan kingdom grows from their collision. For generations, the memory of defeat must have remained close. The Yuezhi had lost a ruler, a homeland, and control over their eastern territories. Yet their movement west does not end in disappearance. It carries them toward one of the richest regions of Central Asia at precisely the moment when older powers are weakening. The disaster that scatters them also places them beside Bactria. where fractured cities and rival dynasties are vulnerable to a new force. Soon the migrants will cross the Oxus not as refugees searching for pasture, but as conquerors entering a land already filled with the ruins and wealth of earlier empires. The Oxus is not a river. To the people approaching from the north, it is a boundary between two ways of life. Beyond it lies Bactria, a land of irrigated plains, walled settlements, vineyards, orchards, temples, and cities whose streets still carry the architectural habits of the Greek world. To cross the river is to enter a region where conquest cannot be completed by defeating one army in open country. The canals must keep flowing, storehouses must remain guarded, tax collectors, scribes, metalworkers, and local landholders must be persuaded, threatened or absorbed. The Yuezhi have survived by movement, but Bactria will force them to learn how to rule. By the time they arrive, the region is weakened. The Greco-Bactrian kingdom, once one of the wealthiest successors to Alexander's empire, has fractured under dynastic rivalry, pressure from nomadic groups, and the difficulty of defending a frontier. Greek-speaking rulers hold cities and mint coins, but their authority is uneven. Some have pushed south toward India, others fight among themselves. Local elites may obey whichever king controls the nearest fortress. In the countryside, farmers continue working fields through political upheavals, because irrigation does not wait for dynasties to settle their disputes. This is the landscape the Yuezhi begin to penetrate. The process is not one decisive invasion. No surviving account describes a single battle in which Bactria falls all at once. Instead, the evidence suggests a slower takeover, shaped by raids, alliances, tribute, settlement, and the gradual replacement of older authorities. Some cities may resist, others may negotiate. A local ruler facing one group of newcomers might invite another as mercenaries, only to discover that the hired warriors have no intention of leaving. No single explanation fully accounts for the change, because the written record is thin and the archaeological traces are uneven. The conquerors themselves are not culturally uniform. The Greater Yuezhi remain divided among several groups, each with its own leaders and interests. Their arrival does not instantly create a unified state. They occupy different parts of the region and establish control over populations already accustomed to changing masters. The old administrative structures are too useful to destroy. Coinage continues. Agricultural estates remain productive. Craftsmen keep working in traditions inherited from Greek, Iranian, and local Bactrian communities. Conquest here is less an erasure than a layering. One of the most surprising features of the transition is how much of the Hellenistic world survives under new rulers. Greek remains visible on coins and in inscriptions. Artistic styles continue to show naturalistic bodies, draped clothing, and familiar divine figures. City plans, workshops, and commercial habits do not disappear because political power changes hands. The Yuezhi are not entering a cultural vacuum, and they do not behave as though everything they encounter must be rejected. They adopt what is useful and reshape what carries prestige. This flexibility is practical. A ruler who wants to collect taxes from a city needs people who know how the records are kept. A chief who wishes to pay soldiers benefits from coinage. A new dynasty seeking legitimacy can place familiar symbols on money, while gradually introducing its own titles and images. The earlier stages of Yuezhi authority in Bactria are difficult to identify with certainty. Coins may imitate earlier rulers. Names may be rendered differently across languages. Political control can change before the visual language of power changes with it. Meanwhile, the human consequences of the takeover unfold far below the level of kings. Farmers along the Oxus may see mounted groups arriving at harvest time, demanding grain, animals, or allegiance. Merchants must learn which checkpoints are safe and which seals are now accepted. Greek-descended families and towns negotiate their place under leaders from the steppe. Iranian-speaking communities, deeply rooted in the region, encounters newcomers whose customs are different but not alien. Intermarriage, military service, trade partnerships, and religious exchange begin to blur distinctions that written sources later try to keep neat. The Yuezhi also discover that Bactria is rich in ways the steppe is not. Its irrigated agriculture can support larger populations and armies. Its cities contain workshops capable of producing weapons, jewellery, pottery, textiles, and luxury goods. Its position opens routes toward India, Iran, and the eastern oases. Control of this land turns displaced pastoral chiefs into holders of taxable territory. Wealth no longer depends only on herds, tribute, or seasonal exchange. It can be stored in granaries, minted into coins, and invested in walls, roads, shrines, and political loyalty. Yet Bactria is not an easy prize to hold. The Hindu Kush rises to the south, formidable but crossed by passes. Beyond those mountains lie Gandhara and the northwestern Indian subcontinent, regions of dense settlement and old commercial importance. To the west, Iranian powers watch the changing balance. To the north, rival steppe peoples remain capable of sudden movement. The Yuezhi have gained a strategic centre, but that centre is exposed in every direction. This exposure encourages consolidation. Separate chiefdoms can survive while enemies are weak, but competition over land, caravan tolls, and prestige eventually sharpens. The 5 principal Yuezhi groups do not remain equals forever. Among them, the Guishuang begin to gather strength. Their leaders understand that mastery of Bactria requires more than cavalry. It requires command of cities, acceptance by local elites, access to trade routes, and the ability to present one authority where several have existed before. The evidence for these early decades remains incomplete. Archaeology reveals continuity alongside disruption, and later royal genealogies simplify what was probably a complicated struggle. The rise of the Xishuang may involve conquest, marriage alliances, negotiated submission, or all of these at different moments. What survives suggests that one clan slowly turns advantage into supremacy. Bactria changes them as much as they change Bactria. The migrants who cross the Oxus searching for security begin to think like rulers of a settled realm. They inherit the ambitions of the kingdoms they replace. Their gaze moves beyond pasture and refuge toward roads, cities, and imperial possibility. From this mixed land of Greek ruins, Iranian traditions, steppe warriors, and Asian commerce, a new political identity begins to take shape. It will need a unifier. And soon one leader of the Guishuang will attempt what none of the Yuezhi chiefs has yet achieved, bringing the divided clans beneath a single crown. The man who begins this transformation does not enter history with the clarity of a Roman emperor or a Chinese court official. His name appears in different forms, his dates remain uncertain, and the sequence of his early victories must be reconstructed from coins, inscriptions, and later summaries. He is usually known as Kujula Kadphises, the leader who raises the Guishuang above the other Yuezhi divisions and turns a loose world of competing chiefs into the foundation of the Kushan state. His achievement is not simply military. Others before him have conquered valleys and seized cities. Kujula's deeper success lies in making different populations accept that one authority can rule across cultural boundaries. The unification probably unfolds gradually during the 1st century CE, although scholars still debate the precise chronology. There is no surviving campaign diary, and no detailed account from inside the new kingdom. Chinese historical records describe the Guishuang chief defeating the other Yuezhi groups and establishing himself as king, but they compress what may have been decades of rivalry into a few lines. Behind that summary likely stand shifting alliances, battles between mounted forces, negotiations with urban elites, and the careful absorption of defeated clans. Some rivals may be destroyed, others may retain local influence after acknowledging Kujula's supremacy. Empires often begin not with complete replacement, but with the successful management of people who have every reason to resist. Kujula's position is strengthened by the geography inherited from Bactria, from the valleys north of the Hindu Kush. He can move toward the passes leading south into Kabul and Gandhara. These regions are politically fragmented. Indo-Greek rulers, Indo-Scythian dynasties, and Indo-Parthian chiefs compete over cities, trade corridors, and fertile districts. Their coins circulate together, their territories overlap, and their alliances change quickly. The complexity that might repel a weaker invader offers Kujula an opportunity. He does not need to defeat one enormous empire. He can expand through a landscape of smaller powers whose legitimacy is already unstable. Coinage provides some of the clearest clues to how he approaches this challenge. Early coins associated with Kujula imitate or adapt the money of previous rulers, including the Indo-Greek king Hermaeus. On some issues, a familiar Hellenistic-style portrait appears on one side while Kujula's own name and titles emerge on the other. This is not evidence that he lacks imagination. It is a calculated use of trust. Coins are handled by merchants or soldiers, farmers, tax collectors, and money changers. A new ruler who preserves recognizable weight standards and imagery reduces disruption. The currency says that the world has changed, but not so completely that ordinary exchange becomes impossible. The strategy also reveals something important about Kushan identity. Kujula does not attempt to purify the kingdom into a single tradition. He governs through inheritance and adaptation. Greek letters, Iranian royal customs, steppe political authority, and Indian religious symbols can all serve the same expanding state. The result may look inconsistent to modern observers accustomed to national languages and fixed cultural borders. In the ancient crossroads of Central and South Asia, inconsistency is often a form of strength. A symbol familiar in one city can coexist with another symbol favoured beyond the next mountain pass. Kujula's titles grow more ambitious as his influence increases. He's presented not merely as a local chief, but as a great king and ruler of kings. Such language is inherited from Iranian and Hellenistic traditions, yet it also reflects a practical political arrangement. Many communities under Kushan authority probably continue to be governed by subordinate princes, clan leaders, city officials, or military commanders. Kujula's supremacy rests above them. The title therefore expresses both prestige and structure, one king claiming authority over other men who still exercise power. The armies behind this expansion remain partly hidden from view. Kushan forces likely include mounted archers and armoured cavalry shaped by steppe warfare, but conquest south of the Hindu Kush also requires infantry, siege capability, local allies, and reliable supply. Horses offer speed, but horses must be fed. A campaign moving through mountain valleys depends on grain stores, guides, bridges, and cooperation from settled communities. Kujula's ability to keep advancing suggests that he can draw resources from conquered territory rather than relying only on mobile war bands. The Confederation is becoming an organized kingdom. His expansion toward Kabul and Gandhara places the Kushans closer to the richest routes of northern India. Gandhara is especially valuable. Its valleys connect the mountain roads of Central Asia with the Indus system, while its cities preserve strong traditions of trade, craftsmanship, and religious patronage. Buddhist monasteries stand near commercial corridors, supported by donations from rulers, merchants, and local families. The region has already experienced Persian, Greek, Mauryan, Indo-Greek, Saka, and Parthian rule. The arrival of the Kushans becomes another layer, but one with consequences far beyond the duration of a single conquest. The population Kujula governs is therefore astonishingly varied. In northern lands, Bactrian and other Iranian languages are common. Greek remains useful in administration and coinage. South of the mountains, Prakrit languages and Indian scripts appear. Religious communities honour local gods, Iranian deities, Greek divine forms, Buddhist teachers, and emerging Hindu traditions. No ruler could erase this complexity without destroying the trade and productivity that make the kingdom valuable. Kujula's achievement is to place a political frame around it. The lesser-known detail is that the founder of the Kushan Empire may never have ruled an empire resembling the vast realm later associated with his dynasty. Much of that expansion belongs to his successors. Kujula creates the mechanism rather than the final map. He unifies the Guishwang, breaks rival powers, secures routes across the Hindu Kush, and introduces a flexible language of kingship. What survives in the record suggests that his reign is a bridge between two political worlds, the divided Yuezhi chiefdoms of Bactria and the imperial Kushan system that will extend deep into northern India. His success does not eliminate uncertainty. The relationship between some early rulers is debated, and the ordering of coins can produce competing reconstructions. Names that appear distinct may represent titles, local forms, or separate kings. Archaeological evidence cannot always be matched neatly to written sources. The early dynasty remains partly obscured by its own adaptability, because it borrows so effectively from earlier rulers that the boundary between imitation and independent authority can be difficult to identify. Yet the larger movement is clear. A people once driven from the Gansu corridor now commands the passes of the Hindu Kush. A clan once counted as one among 5 has defeated or absorbed its rivals. The Zhuishang name is becoming Kushan, no longer merely the label of a Yuezhi division but the name of a royal house. Kujula has taken the memory of displacement and answered it with consolidation. He has not yet mastered every road between China and India. but he has secured the ground from which such mastery becomes possible. When he looks south, he sees more than new territory. He sees the plains beyond the mountains, the river systems carrying goods toward the Arabian Sea, and cities whose wealth is tied to both overland and maritime commerce. To the west lie Iranian markets. To the east, the distant routes toward China remain alive. The kingdom is no longer trapped within Bactria. It is opening in every direction, and the rulers who follow Kujula will inherit a state designed for expansion between worlds. Expansion changes the meaning of the Kushan kingdom. Under Kujula Kadphises, the Gishwang have become the dominant force among the Yuezhi and have pushed through the mountain corridors toward Kabul and Gandhara. Under the rulers who follow, those corridors become the spine of something larger. The Kushans are no longer simply a Central Asian dynasty holding conquered valleys. Their authority begins to stretch across regions that belong to different climates, languages, religious traditions, and commercial systems. From the cold uplands of Bactria to the warm plains of northern India, the dynasty creates an empire whose strength comes from linking places that had rarely remained under one power for long. The chronology is still imperfect. Coins preserve names, but not always clear family relationships. Inscriptions survive in fragments: Chinese, Roman, Indian. And later historical traditions observe the Kushans from different distances, often using unfamiliar versions of royal names. One ruler commonly placed after Kujula is Vima Takto, though his identity and position in the dynasty remain debated. Another, Vima Kadphises, appears more clearly as a major architect of imperial expansion. The evidence remains incomplete, but the general direction is unmistakable. Kushan armies and administrators move south and east, deepening their control over Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the northwestern Indian subcontinent. Crossing the Hindu Kush is only the beginning. The mountains are not a single wall but a system of high ridges, difficult passes, narrow valleys, and routes that can be blocked by snow or threatened by local resistance. Armies travelling through them must move carefully. Pack animals carry food and equipment. Garrisons secure important junctions. Fortified settlements protect approaches to river valleys. The Kushans have inherited the mobility of their steppe ancestors. But their empire now depends on controlling fixed points. Bridges, passes, market towns, irrigation districts, and roads where taxes can be collected. South of the mountains lies Gandhara, one of the great meeting grounds of the ancient world. Its urban centres connect Central Asia with the Indus Basin. Greek artistic traditions survive there beside Iranian customs and Indian religions. Buddhist monasteries overlook trade routes, receiving donations from merchants who depend on safe travel. Artisans carve stone, shape stucco figures, cast metal objects, and produce images that blend influences without belonging entirely to any single source. For the Kushans, Gandhara offers more than wealth. It provides access to a cultural language capable of speaking to many subjects at once. Farther east, the roads open toward the Punjab and the broad river systems of northern India. These regions are densely settled and agriculturally productive. They contain old cities, temples, workshops, and networks of local authority. Conquest here cannot rely only on raids. A ruler must maintain harvests, protect irrigation, recognize existing elites, and manage the flow of taxes. The Kushans seem to govern through a combination of royal officials, military commanders, subordinate rulers, and local institutions. Their authority may be direct in strategic centres and looser at the edges. Ancient empires often resemble webs of influence rather than uniformly controlled blocks of territory. Mathura becomes especially important. Located farther inside northern India, it is a centre of trade, religious activity, and artistic production. Its inclusion in the Kushan sphere signals that the dynasty is no longer merely occupying the northwestern frontier. It is becoming an Indian imperial power as well as a Central Asian one. From Mathura, routes connect to the Ganges basin and to commercial networks reaching deeper into the subcontinent. Kushan rule now touches communities whose political traditions differ greatly from those of Bactria, yet the dynasty does not abandon its older identity. Instead, it adds new forms to it. This is visible in royal representation. Kushan rulers appear in heavy Central Asian clothing, long coats, trousers, and boots, even when issuing coins and inscriptions for populations in warmer Indian regions. Their dress announces origins in the steppe and highlands. At the same time, Their titles, languages, and religious imagery adapt to local expectations. They can present themselves as great kings in an Iranian tradition, use Greek-derived script in Bactria, and patronize institutions rooted in Indian religious life. Their authority is not built on cultural uniformity, it is built on the claim that many traditions can exist beneath one royal power. The empire's western reaches remain connected to Iranian lands, while the north retains ties to the steppe and the Oxus Valley. To the east, routes ultimately approach the Tarim Basin, where oasis kingdoms mediate contact with Han China. To the south, the Indus leads toward ports linked to the Arabian Sea. Goods entering Kushan territory may have travelled from Roman Egypt, the Persian Gulf, southern India, Central Asia, or China. This position gives the dynasty extraordinary opportunities, but it also creates vulnerabilities. A rebellion in one valley, conflict along an Iranian frontier, or instability in a mountain pass can disrupt movement across distant parts of the realm. The Kushans respond by making connection itself a form of power. They do not need to produce every luxury good that crosses their territory. They benefit from protecting, taxing, storing, and redistributing those goods. They provide markets where merchants from different regions can exchange cargo. They mint coins that travel across linguistic boundaries. They support cities where translators, money changers, caravan leaders, craftsmen, monks, and officials gather. The empire becomes valuable because it reduces some of the uncertainty that normally surrounds long-distance movement. One surprising consequence is that Kushan political unity may have made travel safer not only for merchants but also for religious communities and wandering teachers. Monasteries along important routes offer lodging, information, and networks of trust. Donations from traders connect commerce with religious patronage. A merchant carrying textiles or spices may help finance a shrine hundreds of kilometers from home. The same roads that move gold and silk begin to carry sacred texts, artistic styles, ritual practices, and stories about distant lands. Yet control is never absolute. Mountain communities retain local independence. Desert routes shift with water availability and political danger. Rival powers remain near the borders. Scholars still debate the maximum extent of Kushan territory, because coins and inscriptions can indicate influence without proving permanent occupation. Some maps show a vast continuous empire, but reality was almost certainly more uneven. What survives in the record suggests strong control over crucial corridors and wealthy centres, surrounded by zones of alliance, tribute, and contested authority. That unevenness does not diminish the achievement. A dynasty descended from displaced migrants now rules across one of the most difficult geographical transitions in Eurasia. Its subjects live on opposite sides of immense mountain chains. Its cities belong to cultural worlds shaped by Greece, Iran, India, and the steppe. Its merchants look toward China and the Mediterranean. Few states occupy so many borders at once. The Kushans have become an empire between worlds, but territory alone does not explain their success. The real source of their strength lies in the roads running through it. Those roads are about to transform royal power into extraordinary wealth, carrying silk, horses, spices, stones, metals, glass, and ideas across the empire's guarded crossings. The roads the Kushans control are rarely roads in the modern sense. Some are packed earth tracks crossing open plains. Others are narrow paths carved above rivers, where one misstep sends an animal and its cargo into a gorge. In the deserts, a route may exist only as a sequence of wells remembered by guides. Across the Hindu Kush, trails climb toward passes where snow can remain long after spring has reached the valleys below. A caravan moving through this world does not follow a line drawn on a map. It follows water, grazing, political permission, weather, rumour, and the knowledge of people who understand when a route is open and when it has become a trap. The Kushan Empire sits across several of these vulnerable passages. From Bactria, travellers can move east toward the Pamirs and the oasis kingdoms bordering the Tarim Basin. Southward routes cross the Hindu Kush into the Kabul Valley and Gandhara. Farther west, roads connect with Iranian lands and the markets beyond them. To the southeast, the Indus system leads toward ports participating in maritime trade across the Arabian Sea. No Kushan ruler controls the entire journey between China and Rome, but the dynasty holds enough of the middle ground to influence how goods, people, and information pass between distant worlds. This control depends on much more than military occupation. A caravan may contain dozens or hundreds of animals, each requiring food and water. Bactrian camels can carry heavy loads across dry terrain and endure conditions that exhaust horses, but they are not invulnerable. Hooves split, packs shift, animals become sick, drivers need shelter, grain, fodder, and replacement equipment. At major stopping points, merchants seek warehouses, money changers, interpreters, guides, guards, and officials willing to recognize contracts made far from home. A successful trade corridor is therefore a chain of human services, not merely an empty road watched by soldiers. Kushan authority helps stabilize that chain. Garrisons protect important crossings and mountain entrances. Officials collect tolls and taxes. Local rulers may be permitted to retain power so long as they keep the route open and deliver revenue. Markets grow near bridges, river ports, and caravan stations. A settlement that begins as a place to water animals can become a town crowded with craftsmen, brokers, innkeepers, and religious communities. The empire does not eliminate danger, but it can make danger predictable, and predictability is one of the most valuable commodities in long-distance trade. Protection and exploitation exist side by side. Merchants are willing to pay for security, but every checkpoint creates an opportunity for abuse. A governor may demand more than the official toll. Soldiers may confiscate cargo under the excuse of inspection. Local chiefs may promise safe passage, then quietly support raiders farther along the road. Kushan rulers must balance revenue against the risk of driving merchants elsewhere. The Silk Road network always offers alternatives. Although those alternatives may be longer, harsher, or controlled by rival powers, a kingdom that becomes too greedy can watch its wealth disappear into another valley. The most difficult routes cross the Hindu Kush. These mountains shape the empire because they divide its northern and southern heartlands while also binding them together. During favourable seasons, the passes carry soldiers, merchants, officials, monks, animals, and royal messages. In winter, deep snow and sudden storms can close entire corridors. Travellers wait in valleys, sometimes for weeks, while supplies diminish. Avalanches erase paths. Meltwater destroys bridges. Even experienced guides can misjudge the weather. The empire's reach changes with the seasons, expanding when roads open and contracting when the mountains become nearly impassable. The Kushans respond by holding several routes rather than depending on one. This creates resilience. If conflict blocks a western approach, goods may move through another valley. If a pass becomes dangerous, caravans can delay or divide their cargo. Control over multiple corridors also strengthens the dynasty's bargaining power. Merchants cannot easily avoid Kushan territory when the empire commands the most practical crossings between Bactria, Gandhara, and northern India. River systems extend this network beyond the mountains. The Kabul River carries movement toward the Indus, while the Indus itself connects inland markets with regions closer to the sea. Goods arriving from Central Asia can continue south toward ports, where maritime merchants bring products from Arabia, Eastern Africa, the Persian Gulf, and the Western Indian Ocean. This means the Kushan economy is not dependent only on the overland trade later romanticized as the Silk Road. Land routes and sea routes intersect within the same commercial world. A stone mined in India may travel north by caravan, while a Mediterranean glass vessel arrives by ship and then moves inland toward a Kushan court. The people guiding these movements are often more important than the kings whose portraits appear on coins. Caravan leaders know which officials can be trusted, which wells have turned brackish, and which local conflicts make a route unsafe. Translators mediate between merchants who share neither language nor legal custom. Money changers evaluate coins from different kingdoms, checking weight and metal quality. Animal handlers recognize the early signs of exhaustion. Local villagers sell food, repair harnesses, and pass along news. Without these ordinary specialists, imperial geography remains theoretical. Information moves almost as quickly as valuable cargo. Reports of war, drought, disease, price changes, and royal succession travel from market to market. A merchant approaching Bactria may already know that a ruler in India has died or that unrest has closed a road farther west. Rumour can redirect entire caravans. Kushan officials benefit from these networks, using travellers as informal sources of intelligence. An empire spread across mountains cannot rely only on official messengers. News from merchants, pilgrims, and local administrators helps the court understand distant regions that royal armies may not visit for months. Religious institutions become part of the infrastructure. Buddhist monasteries often stand near trade routes and urban centres, supported by gifts from merchants and officials. They can provide lodging, contacts, and trusted communities across long distances. A donor who contributes to a monastery in Gandhara may strengthen a network extending towards Central Asia. Religious generosity and commercial strategy are not necessarily separate motives. Supporting a monastery can express devotion, while also building relationships in places where travellers need protection and assistance. The empire's roads therefore carry more than silk. They transport artistic techniques, coin designs, religious ideas, medical knowledge, stories, scripts, and political symbols. A sculptor in Gandhara can encounter forms ultimately derived from the Mediterranean world. A monk from India can meet Central Asian travellers preparing to continue east. An Iranian deity can appear on the currency of a king ruling Indian cities. These combinations do not emerge because cultures blend automatically. They arise because thousands of people repeatedly move through the same protected spaces. Scholars still debate how directly the Kushan state administered every part of this network. Some routes may have been supervised by royal officers, while others depended on alliances with local chiefs or city authorities. The evidence remains incomplete, and no surviving Kushan document explains a unified transport policy. Yet the pattern of cities, coins, inscriptions, and religious foundations suggest that the dynasty understood the value of connection. Its power is concentrated where movement can be taxed, protected, and redirected. The Kushans do not create the ancient routes, but they turn geography into government. The passes, rivers, oases, and market towns become pieces of an imperial system. Every caravan crossing their territory strengthens that system, paying tolls, feeding cities, carrying royal currency, and spreading the reputation of Kushan stability. Soon the wealth moving along these roads will appear in a more visible form. It will be struck into heavy gold coins, buried in hoards, displayed at court, donated to religious institutions, and transformed into one of the clearest signs that the kingdom between worlds has become a major economic power. Gold gives the Kushan Empire a new voice. Roads and passes explain how the kingdom grows, but coins reveal what that growth becomes. They move through markets, cross borders, pay soldiers, settle taxes, and survive long after palaces collapse. A coin carries a ruler's portrait. Titles, religious choices, metal standards, and political ambition under the Kushans, especially from the reign of Vima Kadphises onward. Gold coinage becomes one of the clearest signs that this kingdom at the centre of Eurasia is no longer merely surviving between greater powers, it is drawing wealth from them. The gold itself raises questions. Some of it may come from trade with the Roman world, where demand for Eastern luxuries sends large quantities of precious metal toward India. Roman writers complain that fortunes are disappearing eastward in exchange for spices, perfumes, gemstones, fine textiles, and other goods desired by wealthy consumers. Their frustration should not be treated as a precise economic account, but it points to a real flow of wealth. Roman coins and Mediterranean objects reach the Indian Ocean and lands farther inland, while Eastern goods travel west through ports and caravans. The Kushans benefit from standing where these systems overlap. Yet gold does not simply arrive in Roman form and remain untouched. Kushan rulers remit wealth into their own currency. Heavy gold coins bearing royal images circulate through the empire and beyond it. On some issues, the king stands before a fire altar, dressed in a long coat and boots, presenting himself in a visual language rooted in Central Asian and Iranian traditions. Greek-derived letters may surround the image, even as the political message speaks to subjects across northern India. The coin is not merely payment, it is an imperial statement that different cultural forms can be gathered beneath one authority. Vima Kadphises is often associated with a major expansion of Kushan gold coinage. His issues project confidence. Flames sometimes rise from his shoulders, an image whose precise meaning is still debated. It may indicate divine radiance, royal glory, or a sacred quality attached to kingship. On the reverse, the Indian god Shiva appears with the bull Nandi on many coins, showing how Kushan royal imagery adapts to the religious landscape south of the Hindu Kush. A dynasty descended from steppe migrants is now speaking through symbols recognized in India while retaining the dress and titles of its northern heritage. These coins travel through a world filled with competing currencies: Roman aurae, Parthian silver, local copper issues, older Indo-Greek designs, and Indian coin traditions may all be encountered in major markets. Money changers evaluate weight, purity, and reputation. A coin may be accepted far from the territory where it was minted, but only if merchants trust its metal. The Kushans build that trust by producing high-value gold currency of reliable quality. Political authority becomes measurable in weight. Gold coins do not pay for every daily purchase. Most ordinary transactions depend on copper money, barter, credit, grain, and local obligations. Gold serves larger exchanges, military payments, elite gifts, state finance, commercial settlements, religious donations, and the storage of wealth. Its visibility can distort the surviving record because precious coins are more likely to be hoarded. Even so, their abundance signals access to resources far beyond the output of a single valley. The cargoes moving through Kushan territory are astonishingly varied. From China comes silk, light enough to carry over immense distances and valuable enough to justify the risk. Central Asia supplies horses, furs, livestock products, and lapis lazuli. India contributes spices, cotton textiles, ivory, pearls, gemstones, aromatics, dyes, and worked luxury goods. From the Mediterranean and Western Asia arrive glassware, wine, metal vessels, coral, and coins. Most objects move in stages, bought and sold many times before reaching a final owner. Bagram, north of Kabul, offers one of the most vivid glimpses of this connected world. Archaeologists uncovered storerooms containing objects from widely separated regions: Roman glass and bronze vessels, Indian ivory carvings, and Chinese lacquerware. The exact interpretation of the deposits remains uncertain. They may represent royal treasure, merchant stock, diplomatic gifts, or goods sealed away during a crisis. No single explanation fully accounts for every object. What matters is that such things could be gathered in one Kushan center. Bagram was a place where the material worlds of the Mediterranean, India, and China met inside locked rooms. Luxury trade attracts attention because its objects survive beautifully, but the empire also depends on less glamorous cargo. Grain feeds garrisons and cities, salt preserves food and supports animals, timber is needed for roofs, carts, tools, and fuel, wool, leather, copper, iron, and ordinary pottery sustain daily life. The caravan carrying sacks of grain can matter more during a winter shortage than one carrying silk. Kushan prosperity rests on both spectacular long-distance exchange and the regional movement of essential goods. Trade also transforms social power. Merchants who accumulate wealth can fund monasteries, sponsor inscriptions, commission religious images, and establish family reputations in distant cities. Artisans respond to new customers by blending materials and styles. Local elites acquire imported goods not only for usefulness, but to display access to distant worlds. An object becomes prestigious because of the distance it has crossed. The court benefits at every stage. Taxes may be collected at markets, river crossings, ports, and city gates. Tribute arrives from subordinate rulers. Royal control of coinage allows the dynasty to convert incoming metal into a recognizable symbol of Kushan sovereignty. Wealth supports armies, roads, monuments, and patronage. It also supports competition within the elite, where gifts strengthen loyalty. But prosperity creates dependence. If war closes a route, if Roman demand declines, if a rival captures a pass, or if maritime trade shifts toward other ports, revenue can weaken. Scholars still debate how much Kushan power depends on international commerce compared with agriculture and internal taxation. The evidence suggests that long-distance trade magnifies the empire's wealth, but it does not replace the fields, towns, and local markets supporting its population. For now, the system is expanding. Gold coins pass from hand to hand, carrying the image of rulers who command mountain routes and Indian cities. Imported objects fill storerooms, merchant donations enrich religious institutions. The Kushan Empire is becoming wealthy enough to turn exchange into culture and commerce into legitimacy. Under the next great ruler, that wealth will finance an even larger claim. that the kingdom between civilizations is itself one of the central powers of the ancient world. Kanishka enters the Kushan story at the moment when conquest must become something more durable. The empire already controls wealthy cities, mountain corridors, and commercial routes stretching from Bactria into northern India. Its rulers mint gold, command mixed armies, and draw revenue from trade passing between distant civilizations. Yet territory gathered through expansion can fragment as quickly as it forms. Local elites remember older dynasties. Mountain governors may become too independent. Merchants value stability more than royal ambition. Kanishka's achievement is to take this broad, uneven realm and give it a stronger imperial identity. His reign is one of the most important in Kushan history, and one of the most difficult to date precisely. For generations, historians argued over the era established by his accession, with proposed starting points separated by decades. Many scholars now place the beginning of his reign in the 2nd century CE, often around 127, but the debate illustrates how incomplete the evidence remains. The Kushans leave behind inscriptions, coins, statues, and archaeological sites. Yet no continuous court history survives to explain Kanishka's decisions. His image is visible, but his personality is almost entirely lost. A damaged statue from Mathura captures the authority he wished to project. The ruler stands solidly in heavy clothing, with a long coat, trousers, and boots suited to the colder northern lands from which the dynasty emerged. His body appears broad and immovable. The head is missing, but the inscription identifies him. One hand rests near a weapon, while the pose communicates strength without movement. In the warmth of northern India, Kanishka continues to display the dress of Central Asian kingship. He does not hide the dynasty's foreign origins. He turns them into a sign of imperial distinction. The realm associated with him stretches across an extraordinary range of landscapes. In the north, Kushan authority reaches Bactria and important parts of Central Asia. South of the Hindu Kush, it includes Kabul, Gandhara, and the Indus regions. Farther east, royal inscriptions and artistic patronage reveal strong influence around Mathura and across sections of the northern Indian plains. The exact borders remain disputed, and maps often give a misleading impression of uniform control. Some regions are probably governed directly, while others acknowledge Kushan supremacy through tribute, alliance, or subordinate rulers. Even so, Kanishka commands one of the largest political systems then operating between the Roman, Parthian, Chinese, and Indian worlds. Size creates administrative problems. Messages must cross mountains where weather can delay travel for weeks. Officials working far from the court may exploit their distance. Different regions use different languages, scripts, calendars, legal customs, and measures of value. Kanishka does not attempt to erase these differences. Instead, Kushan administration appears to function through adaptation. Local systems continue where useful, while royal titles, coinage, military power, and public inscriptions create a wider framework of authority. Bactrian becomes especially important as a language of Kushan rule in the northern heartlands. It is an Iranian language written in a modified Greek alphabet, itself a legacy of the Hellenistic occupation of the region. This combination perfectly reflects the empire. A Central Asian dynasty uses an Iranian language expressed through Greek-derived letters to govern territories extending deep into India. Political identity is assembled from inherited materials rather than created from a single source. Kanishka's coins make this principle visible on a small scale. His early issues may preserve Greek wording, while later coins increasingly use Bactrian. The gods shown on them come from an astonishing range of traditions. Iranian deities appear beside Greek figures, Indian gods, and images connected with Buddhism. Their names are written for subjects who may recognize some, but not all of them. This diversity is not random decoration. It shows a ruler addressing multiple communities while claiming access to a sacred world larger than any single regional tradition. Kanishka is particularly remembered for his relationship with Buddhism. Later, Buddhist accounts portray him as a great patron, sometimes comparing his importance with that of the Mauryan emperor Ashoka. Tradition associates him with the construction of monasteries, the support of learned monks, and a major Buddhist council in Kashmir. Some of these stories were recorded long after his lifetime, and have been shaped by religious memory. Scholars still debate which details are historical. What survives in the record nevertheless suggests substantial Kushan support for Buddhist institutions during his reign. Near Purushapura, the city known today as Peshawar, Kanishka is said to have sponsored an enormous stupa. Chinese pilgrims visiting centuries later describe a monument of extraordinary height, repeatedly damaged and rebuilt. The original structure has vanished, and accounts of its dimensions may have grown with retelling, but archaeological traces confirm the importance of the site. A monumental stupa near the imperial centre would have served several purposes at once. It expressed religious devotion, displayed royal wealth, attracted pilgrims, and turned the city into a landmark known across Asia. Kanishka's support does not make the empire exclusively Buddhist. This is one of the most important qualifications. His coins continue to honour many gods, and Kushan subjects practice a wide range of religions. Royal patronage is plural rather than narrowly confessional. A Buddhist monastery may receive support in one region, while Iranian cults, local shrines, and Indian religious communities flourish elsewhere. Kanishka's authority rests partly on his ability to stand above these differences. The empire's military power remains essential. Kushan forces guard the northern approaches, protect the passes, and confront rivals near the Tarim Basin and Iranian frontier. Later sources preserve memories of conflict with Chinese commanders and regional powers, though the sequence is uncertain. Mounted warriors remain central to Kushan's strength, especially heavily equipped cavalry capable of delivering force across open terrain. Yet armies alone cannot hold a realm of this scale. Kanishka also needs roads, tax revenue, loyal cities, religious legitimacy, and an image of kingship recognizable from Bactria to Mathura. Under him, those elements converge. Commercial wealth finances patronage. Patronage strengthens cities and religious institutions. Coins carry the king's authority through markets where his officials may rarely appear. Monuments transform distant landscapes into imperial spaces. Artists and scribes produce forms that can be understood across several cultures. The Kushan state becomes more than a collection of conquered territories. It becomes a system capable of translating power. No single explanation fully accounts for Kanishka's later fame. Part comes from the geographical scale of his rule. Part comes from Buddhist traditions that preserve his name when many other Kushan kings fade into obscurity. Part comes from the artistic and religious developments flourishing under his dynasty. He rules at a moment when the roads through the empire carry not only profitable cargo, but ideas ready to move far beyond their places of origin. Kanishka's greatest transformation may therefore be less visible than his statues or gold coins. He makes the Kushan realm a cultural engine. Its cities become places where merchants, pilgrims, sculptors, translators, and priests encounter one another under the protection of imperial power. The dynasty controls territory, but its deeper influence emerges in the crowded urban centres where the ancient world gathers and begins to change. The Kushan Empire becomes most visible not at its borders, but in its cities. Roads may carry wealth across mountains and deserts, yet cities are where that movement slows, changes hands, and leaves traces behind. A caravan entering a Kushan centre brings more than cargo. It brings news of war, rumours about distant courts, unfamiliar coins, foreign clothing, religious stories, new artistic techniques, and people searching for guides who can lead them farther. In the crowded streets of Begram, Purushapura, Taxila, and Mathura, the empire's great geographical achievement becomes an ordinary human experience. Different worlds meet not as abstractions, but at market stalls, workshops, courtyards, tax offices, monasteries, and warehouses. Begram stands near the routes connecting Bactria with the Kabul Valley and the passes leading toward India. Its ancient identity is often associated with Kapisa, a regional centre of considerable strategic importance. From here, rulers can watch movement between the northern and southern parts of the empire. The city lies close enough to the Hindu Kush to feel the influence of the mountains. Yet it also belongs to fertile territory, capable of supporting courts, garrisons, artisans, and merchants. Its location makes it more than a stopping point. It becomes a place where goods arriving from opposite ends of Eurasia can be gathered, inspected, stored, displayed, and redistributed. The famous deposits found there reveal the scale of that exchange. Roman glass vessels, Mediterranean-style bronzes, Chinese lacquerware, and finely carved Indian ivories were discovered together in rooms that had once been sealed. Some of the glass is so delicate that it seems almost weightless. The ivory panels show elegant figures, plants, animals, and architectural forms, probably intended to decorate furniture or luxury objects. The Chinese lacquer pieces have travelled immense distances despite being vulnerable to heat and moisture. Scholars still debate whether these rooms belong to a royal treasury, a merchant warehouse, or a protected collection hidden during political danger. Whatever their exact purpose, the objects demonstrate that Begram was connected to networks extending far beyond Kushan territory. Farther southeast, Prushapura becomes one of the dynasty's most important capitals. The modern city of Peshawar has grown over much of the ancient landscape, making reconstruction difficult, but surviving remains and later descriptions suggest a thriving political and religious centre. Its position near the eastern end of the Khyber Pass gives it exceptional value. Caravans descending from Afghanistan reach the plains here. Armies moving between Central Asia and the subcontinent must pass through or near it. Royal officials can tax traffic, monitor foreign visitors, and maintain contact with the northern heartlands. The city's markets would have been filled with goods from both sides of the mountains. Pack animals arrive covered in dust, while porters unload textiles, spices, metal vessels, stones, medicines, timber, and food. Languages overlap in bargaining. A merchant from Bactria may require an interpreter to negotiate with a trader from the Ganges basin. Contracts depend on witnesses, trusted brokers, or established merchant communities. Money changers compare copper, silver, and gold coins issued under different rulers. Weights must be checked carefully. A small error repeated across a large cargo can become a fortune. Above the noise of commerce rise religious monuments, including the enormous stupa associated with Kanishka. Pilgrims entering Prushapura encounter a city where royal authority and sacred geography reinforce one another. Monasteries benefit from donations made by rulers, merchants, officials, and ordinary families. In return, they create stable institutions along routes where travellers need shelter and trustworthy contacts. A monk may know which road has flooded, which governor has imposed a new toll, or which caravan is preparing to cross the mountains. Spiritual and practical networks overlap without contradiction. Taxila, farther east, carries an even older reputation. Long before Kushan rule, it has stood near the meeting point of routes from Central Asia, Iran, Kashmir, and the Indian plains. Persians, Greeks, Mauryans, Indo-Greeks, Sakas, and Indo-Parthians have all shaped the region. Under the Kushans, Taxila continues as a centre of settlement, craft production, trade, and learning. Archaeological remains reveal planned streets, houses, religious buildings, and workshops. Although the city changed location and form more than once across its long history, the lesser-known reality is that such cities were not always grand. Unified capitals built according to one royal plan. They were layered places. A district might contain older walls reused by new inhabitants. A shrine could stand beside a workshop. Wealthy compounds might lie only a short distance from crowded housing and animal yards. Smoke from kilns mixed with cooking fires. Waste collected near drains. The monumental ruins that survive can obscure the smell, noise, and physical effort required to keep an ancient city alive. Mathura presents another face of Kushan urban life. Located deep within northern India, it is far removed from the Central Asian landscapes where the dynasty began. The city stands near important river and land routes and serves as a major centre of religious and artistic activity. Buddhist, Jain, and Brahmanical communities all flourish there. Workshops produce sculptures in a distinctive red sandstone, creating images of rulers, deities, monks, donors, and sacred figures. These works differ from the grey schist sculptures associated with Gandhara, showing that Kushan culture does not produce one uniform imperial style. In Mathura, royal authority becomes embedded within Indian traditions. Inscriptions record donations, official titles, and religious dedications. Local families participate in the creation of monuments. Artisans adapt older forms to new patrons. Images of the Buddha become increasingly prominent, though the exact timing and causes of this development remain debated. The city demonstrates how Kushan rule encourages cultural production without controlling every aspect of it. The court provides stability and patronage, but much of the creative energy comes from local communities. These urban centres are connected by movement, yet each remains distinct. Bigram gathers international luxury objects. Purushapura commands a mountain gateway and attracts pilgrims. Taxila carries the weight of centuries of political and intellectual exchange. Mathura anchors the empire within the religious and artistic life of northern India. Together they prevent the Kushan realm from having only one centre. The empire is better understood as a constellation of cities linked by roads, royal authority, commercial interest, and religious networks. The people moving among them rarely experience the empire as a complete map. A merchant knows the sequence of markets where goods can be sold. A monk knows monasteries where he can find lodging. A soldier knows garrisons and supply stations. An official knows districts from which taxes are expected. A sculptor knows where stone can be obtained and which patrons are commissioning images. Their separate movements create the imperial system from below. What survives in the record suggests that urban life is the true machinery of Kushan power. Cities convert harvests into taxes, raw materials into crafted goods, foreign objects into symbols of status, and travellers into carriers of information. They also create the conditions in which beliefs and images begin to cross cultural boundaries. In their streets, gods from distant traditions are no longer separated by geography. Soon they will appear beside one another on the empire's coins, sharing the same metal surface beneath the authority of a Kushan king. A Kushan coin can be smaller than the palm of a hand and still contain an empire. On one side stands the king, wrapped in a heavy coat, sometimes offering at a fire altar or holding a weapon. On the other appears a god, but the god may not belong to the same language, region, or religious tradition as the ruler. One coin honours an Iranian deity, another bears a Greek divine name, another presents Shiva, another shows the Buddha, together. These images form one of the strangest religious records left by any ancient dynasty. The variety is so broad that it can look almost chaotic. Kushan coins include Iranian deities, figures inherited from the Hellenistic world, Indian gods, and Buddhist imagery. Names are often written in Bactrian. A god worshipped in an Iranian setting can therefore appear on money issued by a Central Asian dynasty ruling Indian cities, identified through a script descended from Greek. The coin does not merely travel across cultures, it is made from their intersection. This mixture should not be mistaken for confusion. Ancient rulers rarely chose coin images casually. Currency reaches places where royal monuments do not. Farmers, soldiers, merchants, and pilgrims may all handle the king's image. The reverse side carries another message: the ruler is protected by sacred powers recognized across the empire. By placing many gods on his currency, the king does not claim that all religions are identical. He presents himself as the sovereign beneath whom different divine worlds can coexist. Iranian religious traditions remain especially important. The Kushans rule Bactria and neighbouring lands where Iranian languages and cults have deep roots. Fire altars appear in royal imagery, and deities associated with the sun, moon, victory, royal glory, and fertility are represented on coins. Some are difficult to identify because their names or attributes combine several traditions. Scholars still debate the exact meaning of certain figures. What survives in the record suggests not a single standardized system, but a broad sacred vocabulary adapted for imperial use. Greek influence also persists long after Greek political dominance has faded. Deities with recognizable Hellenistic forms continue to appear. Helios, the sun god, and Selene, the moon goddess, are among the figures represented. Heracles-like forms remain available to Kushan engravers. Their survival does not mean that Greek communities control the court. Artistic forms can outlive the political systems that created them. A familiar divine pose or attribute remains useful even when its meaning has shifted. Indian religious imagery becomes increasingly prominent as Kushan rule extends deeper into the subcontinent. Shiva is one of the most important figures on the coinage of Vima Kadphises and later rulers. He may appear standing with a trident, accompanied by the bull Nandi. Yet even here, identification is not always straightforward. Some researchers argue that the legends and features may reflect a related form understood differently by Kushan patrons. No single explanation fully accounts for every variation. The image may have been designed to speak simultaneously to Indian worshippers and to a court comfortable combining sacred identities. The king himself is presented in near-sacred terms. Flames sometimes rise from his shoulders. His posture and ritual actions separate him from ordinary people. He stands before an altar not as a private worshipper, but as the central figure in a cosmic political order. Kushan kingship draws on several traditions of divine favour, Iranian ideas of royal glory, Hellenistic sacred monarchy, Central Asian clan authority, and Indian concepts of universal rulership. The dynasty does not borrow one model. It layers them. This layering appears beyond currency. In Gandhara, sculptors produce figures with flowing robes, naturalistic bodies, wavy hair, and architectural details associated with classical Mediterranean art. Yet the subjects are frequently Buddhist. In Mathura, artists work in red sandstone and follow local conventions, creating images with a different sense of weight and sacred presence. Both regions flourish under Kushan rule, but neither becomes a uniform imperial style. These differences reveal an empire encouraging exchange without forcing every region into one sacred visual language. Religious patronage is similarly distributed. Buddhist monasteries receive donations from kings, officials, merchants, and local families. Jain communities remain active in Mathura. Brahmanical traditions grow in visibility. Iranian cults continue in the northern regions. Local gods, household rituals, ancestor practices, and protective spirits rarely appear clearly in royal records, but they remain part of daily life. The diversity of coinage may represent only a fraction of the beliefs practiced by Kushan subjects. One lesser-known detail is that the same ruler does not always use the same group of gods throughout his reign. Coin types change according to region, period, political need, or mint. A deity common in one series may be absent from another. This suggests that Kushan religious imagery is responsive rather than fixed. A coin intended for Bactria need not communicate in the same way as one moving through northern India. The coins also resist a modern assumption that religious identity must be exclusive. A merchant might donate to a Buddhist monastery, invoke a local protective god before travelling, accept a coin bearing an Iranian deity, and trade in a city where Shiva is honoured. These actions do not necessarily feel contradictory. Ancient religious life is often cumulative. People seek protection from many sources, especially where travel, illness, harvest failure, and political violence remain constant dangers. Kushan tolerance should not be romanticized as a modern program of equality. Royal patronage favors some institutions more than others, and political usefulness influences religious support. The court's pluralism serves power. By recognizing many gods, the dynasty makes fewer enemies and creates more avenues of legitimacy. Yet practical motives do not make the consequences less real. Temples, monasteries, artists, and worshippers benefit from an environment in which multiple traditions can flourish within the same imperial system. Among all the figures appearing on Kushan money, one is especially significant for what follows. Under Kanishka, the Buddha himself appears on a rare series of coins identified by name. A teacher who began within northern India is now represented through an imperial currency capable of travelling across Central Asia. The image marks more than royal devotion. It reveals that Buddhism has entered the visual and political language of a transcontinental state. From the cities and mints of the Kushan world, that language is preparing to move beyond the mountains. Buddhism does not cross the mountains as an army. It moves quietly, attached to the same networks that carry silk, horses, gemstones, spices, and gold. A monk joins a caravan because travelling alone is dangerous. A merchant donates to a monastery because safe roads and trusted lodging matter as much as profit. A translator learns the language of an oasis kingdom because a teaching cannot survive if no one understands the words. Under Kushan rule, these separate acts begin to form a corridor of belief stretching from northern India through Gandhara and Bactria toward Central Asia and China. The empire occupies a critical position in that movement. Buddhism has already spread far beyond the region where it first emerged. But Kushan political stability gives monks, pilgrims, and religious texts greater opportunities to travel across difficult terrain. The same passes guarded for commercial reasons can also protect religious travellers. The same cities where merchants exchange cargo become places where teachers debate doctrine. Artists create sacred images, and patrons finance new monasteries. The Kushans do not invent this expansion, yet they provide conditions in which it can accelerate. Gandhara becomes one of the most important centres in the process. Its valleys are filled with monasteries built near roads and settlements. Some occupy hillsides above cultivated land, close enough to receive food and donations while remaining separated from urban noise. Their courtyards contain stupas, chapels, living quarters, storage rooms, and spaces where monks gather for instruction. Travellers arriving from India, Bactria, or farther west can encounter a Buddhist world already adapted to a multicultural frontier. The art produced there plays a major role. Sculptors create images of the Buddha in human form, often dressed in robes rendered with deep, flowing folds. His hair may be shown in waves, and his body carries a calm, balanced presence shaped partly by artistic traditions inherited from the Hellenistic world. This has led to popular claims that Greek art alone created the Buddha image, but the history is more complex. Mathura develops its own powerful tradition at roughly the same time. Drawing on Indian forms, scholars still debate the precise sequence and influence between regions. What survives in the record suggests that several artistic traditions contributed to a new visual language of Buddhism. That visual language is portable. A doctrine expressed only through local symbols may be difficult for us outsiders to recognize. A human image of the Buddha can travel more easily, be copied by artists, and become a focus of devotion in places where the original language of the teachings is unfamiliar. Sculptures, small reliefs, manuscript illustrations, and remembered compositions move along the roads. Artists in distant oases do not simply reproduce Gandharan models. They adapt them to local tastes, materials, and religious expectations. Texts travel as well, although the journey is far more fragile. Manuscripts are written on birch bark, palm leaf, wood, or other perishable materials. They can be damaged by water, fire, insects, and rough handling. A single journey across a mountain range may destroy a document that required months to prepare. For this reason, oral transmission remains essential. Monks memorize teachings and recite them in communities where written copies are rare. The spread of Buddhism depends not only on books, but on disciplined human memory. Translation becomes the great challenge. Buddhist teachings emerge in Indian languages, but Central Asia contains many linguistic worlds: Bactrian, Gandhari, Sanskrit, Prakrits, Sogdian, Khotanese, Tocharian languages, and Chinese all appear within the larger network through which the religion moves. A translator must do more than replace one word with another. Concepts shaped by Indian philosophy may have no exact equivalent in another language. Terms for suffering, rebirth, liberation, consciousness, and emptiness carry meanings that can be distorted by a careless choice. Some translators work in teams. One person recites or explains the original text, another interprets it orally, and a scribe produces the written version. Local scholars revise the language to make it readable. Every stage introduces possibility and error. A phrase can become more familiar but less precise. A metaphor can change because the original landscape is unknown. Yet these imperfections are also creative. Buddhism survives its movement across Asia because it can be translated, reinterpreted, and connected to new cultural settings. Kushan cities provide meeting places for this work. In Prushapura, Taxila, Mathura, and Bactrian centres, monks from different regions encounter one another. Some belong to established schools with distinct rules and interpretations. Others emphasize new scriptures and ideals that later become associated with Mahayana Buddhism. Kanishka is linked in later tradition with a major Buddhist council, sometimes placed in Kashmir, where scholars are said to have organized or commented upon sacred teachings. The historical details remain uncertain, and later religious accounts may exaggerate the emperor's role. Even so, the tradition preserves a memory of the Kushan Age as a period of intense Buddhist scholarship and institutional growth. Merchants are among the most important patrons. Their support is practical as well as devotional. Monasteries near trade routes offer reliable communities across great distances. A merchant who donates to one may build social trust with another institution farther along the road. Inscriptions recording gifts reveal that religious patronage is not limited to kings. Women, craftsmen, officials, caravan leaders, and families contribute money, land, images, and architectural elements. The expansion of Buddhism is built through thousands of donations too small to appear in political histories. From Bactria, the religion moves toward the oasis kingdoms surrounding the Tarim Basin. These settlements survive where water allows agriculture along the edges of enormous deserts. Each oasis is a small world separated from the next by dangerous stretches of sand and stone. Caravans follow carefully known routes, carrying food and water between fortified towns, in places such as Khotan, Kucha, and later Dunhuang. Buddhist communities establish monasteries as commission cave temples, translate texts, and train monks who will continue eastward. China receives Buddhism gradually, not in a single moment. Early travellers and missionaries arrive through several routes, and the religion is initially understood through unfamiliar concepts. Chinese scholars search for terms capable of expressing Indian ideas. Some explanations are compared with Taoist thought, sometimes helpfully and sometimes misleadingly. Political acceptance rises and falls. Courts may patronize monasteries, while critics accuse foreign monks of undermining family duties or draining state resources. The journey from Kushan territory to widespread Chinese Buddhism will take centuries. Individuals from the Kushan and Central Asian world become important in that process. Monks and translators carrying names rendered imperfectly in Chinese records arrive at imperial courts and religious communities. One of the most famous is Lokak Sima, active in China during the late 2nd century, who translates early Mahayana texts into Chinese. He is often identified as coming from the Yuezhi or Kushan cultural sphere. His work is difficult, and his translations can appear awkward, but they preserve teachings that might otherwise have vanished. The surprising consequence is that some Buddhist traditions survive more completely outside India than within it. Texts lost in their original languages remain preserved in Chinese or Tibetan translation. Artistic forms that disappear in one region continue elsewhere. The Kushan corridors therefore do more than spread a religion. They create routes through which memory escapes destruction. By carrying Buddhism across the mountains, the empire extends its influence far beyond territories any Kushan army permanently controls. Monasteries, images, and translated scriptures continue moving after royal authority weakens. Yet the very diversity that allows this transmission also complicates the identity of the people who made it possible. Their own language, origins, and political structure remain frustratingly obscure, hidden behind the many cultures they connected. The Kushans become easier to see the farther their influence travels, yet the people themselves remain strangely difficult to define. Their coins appear across a vast region. Their rulers sponsor monuments, armies, cities, and monasteries. Their roads help carry Buddhism toward China. Their art combines traditions from India, Iran, Greece, and Central Asia. But when historians ask a simple question, who exactly were the Kushans, the answer begins to dissolve into fragments. Their ancestors are usually identified with the Yuezhi, the migrating confederation described in Chinese historical records. One division of that confederation, the Guishuang, eventually rises above the others and gives its name to the Kushan dynasty. This outline is widely accepted, but it leaves much unresolved. Chinese writers observe the Yuezhi from outside and fit them into categories familiar to imperial officials. They record movements, rulers, diplomatic missions, and political changes, but rarely describe how the people understood themselves. The name Yuezhi may refer to a broad confederation rather than a single ethnic or linguistic group. By the time the Guishuang established power in Bactria, generations of migration, conquest, intermarriage, and cultural adaptation have already transformed them. Language should offer clues, but here too the evidence is complicated. The Kushans eventually used Bactrian as a major language of administration, written in a modified Greek alphabet. Bactrian belongs to the Iranian language family and reflects the long-established population of the region they conquered. Its use does not prove that the original Kushans were Iranian speakers. A ruling dynasty can adopt the language of its subjects for practical reasons, just as it can adopt their scribes. Tax systems and coin standards. Before Bactrian becomes dominant on royal issues, Greek appears prominently on Kushan coins. In Indian territories, inscriptions use Prakrit and Sanskrit alongside scripts such as Kharosti and Brahmi. The empire speaks in many voices, but the earliest language of the ruling clans remains uncertain. Even royal names resist simple classification. Kujula Kadphises, Vima Takto, Vima Kadphises, Kanishka, Huvishka, and Vasudeva appear in forms shaped by different languages and writing systems. A name recorded in Chinese may look unrelated to the version found on a coin. Titles can be mistaken for personal names. Different rulers may use similar titles, while one ruler may appear under several spellings. Scholars still debate the identity and sequence of some early kings because the surviving evidence does not align neatly. The dynasty's appearance also invites interpretation. Kushan rulers shown on statues and coins wear long coats, trousers, belts, and heavy boots associated with Central Asian equestrian cultures. Their clothing distinguishes them from many of their Indian subjects and preserves a visible connection to the steppe and northern highlands. Yet dress is political theatre as well as evidence. A ruler may wear traditional clothing to emphasize ancestry, military strength, or royal legitimacy even after his court has become deeply integrated into settled urban life. Physical appearance provides even less certainty. Ancient portraits are stylized, and surviving statues are often damaged. Modern efforts to assign the Kushans a fixed racial identity impose categories that would have meant little in their world. Their empire contains populations from Central Asia, Bactria, Afghanistan, the Indus region, and northern India. Soldiers, officials, merchants, artisans, and royal families move across these regions. Intermarriage is likely, though rarely documented directly. The Kushans become a political community layered over extraordinary human diversity. Their religious imagery deepens the mystery. A dynasty's favoured gods can sometimes reveal its origins, but Kushan coins refuse to choose one tradition. Iranian deities stand beside Greek figures, Shiva and the Buddha. Fire altars suggest Iranian sacred customs, while royal titles echo several imperial traditions. This breadth may reflect the dynasty's own mixed heritage, but it may also be deliberate policy. A king ruling many peoples has reason to recognize many gods. Religion reveals how the Kushans govern more clearly than where they began. One of the most important pieces of evidence emerged only in recent decades. An inscription discovered at Rabatak in northern Afghanistan, written in Bactrian, records the achievements of Kanishka and names earlier rulers of the dynasty. It also indicates that Kanishka ordered the use of the Aryan language, generally understood here as Bactrian, replacing Greek in certain official contexts. The inscription helped clarify royal succession and the geographical reach of Kushan power. Yet even this remarkable document does not solve every problem. Parts are damaged, interpretations differ, and its political language presents the dynasty as it wished to be remembered. The Rabatak inscription demonstrates why Kushan history can change with a single discovery. Before such evidence appears, scholars must build chronologies from coin styles, overstrikes, archaeological layers, and foreign records. A newly found inscription can rearrange the sequence of rulers or reveal a city previously unknown to have been under Kushan authority. The evidence remains incomplete not because the empire lacked writing, but because so little of that writing has survived. Climate and construction materials play a role in this disappearance. Many documents were likely written on perishable surfaces. Cities were rebuilt repeatedly. Mud brick walls eroded. Monasteries were abandoned, looted, or covered by later settlement. Warfare destroyed archives. Metal objects were melted down. Coins survived because they were buried, lost, or hidden. But coins communicate in compressed symbols rather than extended explanation. The Kushans left an empire of clues rather than a complete narrative. Later, historical traditions add another layer of distortion. Buddhist sources remember Kanishka as a great patron, but their purpose is religious, not administrative. Chinese histories preserve valuable information, though their authors write from a distant imperial perspective. Indian records often focus on regional dynasties, inscriptions, and religious foundations rather than presenting a continuous Kushan history. Iranian sources become more visible when the Sasanians rise and confront the empire from the west. Each tradition illuminates a different face of the Kushans while leaving the center obscure. Popular theories sometimes attempt to solve this uncertainty by identifying the Kushans directly with one modern ethnic group or nation. Such claims are usually built from selective similarities in names, clothing, language, or geography. They are disputed because ancient confederations do not map cleanly onto modern identities. The Kushans emerged from migration and ruled through cultural adaptation. Their history belongs to many regions, but cannot be reduced to any one of them. Perhaps this uncertainty is not merely a failure of the evidence. It may reflect the nature of the empire itself. The Kushans succeed because they do not remain what they were before entering Bactria. They absorb languages, institutions, gods, artistic forms, and local elites. Their identity is not preserved behind the empire like an untouched core, it is rebuilt through contact. That flexibility creates strength, but it also makes them harder to remember. Civilizations that leave a dominant language, a long historical chronicle, or a clear modern successor are easily placed within national stories. The Kushans leave connections instead: a Greek alphabet carrying an Iranian language, a Central Asian king honouring an Indian god, a Buddhist image moving toward China, and Roman glass stored near Kabul. Their identity survives not as a single answer, but as the pattern formed where worlds overlap. For a time, that pattern holds together. But beyond the western frontier, another Iranian power is rising with a more centralized royal ideology and an appetite for the same strategic corridors. The Kushans have mastered diversity, distance, and exchange. Soon they will discover that the roads which brought them wealth can also carry armies into the heart of their realm. The pressure begins at the edges, where the Kushan Empire has always been strongest and most vulnerable: Bactria, Kabul, Gandhara, and the northern Indian plains are bound together by roads crossing terrain that can separate provinces as easily as connect them. Under Kanishka and his immediate successors, royal authority is strong enough to hold that system in balance. But balance is not permanence. Every distant governor and neighbouring king waits for signs that the centre is weakening. Kanishka is followed by rulers including Huvishka and Vasudeva, under whom Kushan power remains substantial. Gold coinage continues and cities remain active. This is not an empire collapsing immediately after its most famous king. For decades, the structure endures, yet the surviving evidence begins to reveal regional variation. Coin types change. Royal names become less visible in some areas. Local powers reassert themselves. The empire that once expanded through flexibility now faces the danger that flexibility will become fragmentation. The greatest threat rises in the west. In 224 CE, the Sasanian dynasty replaces the Parthian Arsacid rulers in Iran and begins constructing a more aggressive imperial state. Its kings claim the inheritance of ancient Persian power and seek control over territories extending eastward towards Central Asia. Ardashirvai establishes the dynasty, and his son Shapur I pushes its armies across a wide frontier. They possess their own administration, cavalry, royal ideology, an interest in the same commercial arteries that enrich the Kushans. Bactria becomes the natural point of collision. The region controls access between Iran, Central Asia, and the Hindu Kush, and whoever dominates it gains strategic depth and commercial advantage. Sasanian inscriptions boast of eastern conquests, but the exact extent and timing of their control remain debated. Royal claims are not neutral reports. Even so, coinage and later evidence indicate that Western Kushan territories fell under rulers connected to the Sasanian royal house. These men adopt the title Kushansha, or King of the Kushans, creating what historians often call the Kushano-Sasanian realm. The title is revealing. The Sasanians do not erase the Kushan name, they appropriate it. Their governors or subordinate kings issue coins that imitate Kushan designs, while introducing Sasanian crowns, fire altars, and royal imagery. The Kushan identity still carries legitimacy, and familiar forms make conquest easier. A merchant in Bactria can continue using recognizable currency, even as the dynasty behind it changes. For the remaining Kushan rulers, the loss of the northwest is more than a territorial setback. It threatens the geographical logic of the empire. Kabul and the mountain corridors link the northern heartland to Gandhara and India. If the western enemies control these passages, communication becomes harder, taxes less reliable, and military movement more dangerous. The empire begins to lose the ability to function as one connected system. Pressure also develops within northern India. The Kushans had often ruled through local elites, subordinate princes, and regional officials. Such arrangements are efficient while the centre is strong. When royal power weakens, they provide foundations for independence. Local groups issue their own coins, revive older identities, or expand into districts once guarded by Kushan forces. Among them are the Yaudayas and several dynasties associated with the Naga name. Their rise is difficult to trace, but it reflects the shrinking reach of Kushan authority. There is no single rebellion that destroys the empire instead. Control frays at different speeds. One city may recognize a Kushan king while a neighboring district stops sending taxes. A governor may retain royal titles but behave independently. A trade route may remain open after its garrison has vanished. Political maps simplify this process by replacing one colour with another. On the ground, decline is untidy. The silence of the sources makes this slow disintegration harder to follow than any battlefield. Trade itself is changing. The 3rd century brings disruption across much of Eurasia. The Roman Empire experiences civil wars, monetary instability, epidemics, and frontier crises. Iran is transformed by Sasanian expansion and warfare with Rome. Chinese unity collapses after the fall of the Han dynasty, and the western regions become harder for one court to manage. Commerce continues, but the networks become less predictable. Demand shifts, taxes change, and merchants adapt their routes. Scholars still debate how much these commercial changes weaken the Kushans. The empire was supported by agriculture, internal markets, and regional taxation as well as luxury trade. It would be misleading to imagine that declining Roman gold alone brings down the dynasty. Yet instability across several connected regions removes one of the advantages the Kushans once possessed. They had prospered between strong economies. When those economies become disturbed, the middle ground becomes more dangerous and less profitable. Military costs rise at the same time. Protecting the Hindu Kush requires garrisons, horses, supplies, and loyal commanders. Defending the Indian provinces demands forces that cannot always move quickly across the mountains. A ruler facing Sasanian pressure in the west may leave eastern territories exposed. Troops sent south cannot easily return before winter closes a pass. Geography, once converted into imperial power, begins to work against the state. Coinage reflects some of this strain. Later issues may show reduced weight, changing metal quality, simplified designs, or increasingly regional patterns. Coin standards change for many reasons, so caution is necessary. Still, fading uniformity suggests that royal control over mints and circulation is becoming less consistent. Money that once announced a great king across many lands begins to reveal separate political economies. No single explanation fully accounts for the weakening of the Kushan Empire. Sasanian conquest matters. Local independence matters. Dynastic problems may have mattered, though the record says little about court struggles. Trade disruption, military overstretch, and difficult geography all contribute. The diversity that made the empire adaptable may also have made loyalty shallow, where people accepted Kushan rule mainly because it offered security and profit. By the middle of the 3rd century, the dynasty no longer commands the same chain of corridors. Western lands are absorbed into a Sasanian sphere. Northern Indian territories fall increasingly under regional powers. Smaller Kushan rulers survive, still minting coins and holding important cities, but the scale of their world has contracted. The roads remain, merchants, monks, and armies continue to use them. What is disappearing is the single authority that once made those roads feel like parts of one empire. The Kushan Empire does not vanish in fire. No surviving chronicle records a final capital stormed, a last king cut down, or a single year in which the roads fall silent. Instead, the empire contracts until its name covers a much smaller world. Officials still collect taxes in some cities, and merchants still travel through passes once guarded by imperial armies. To people living through the change, the end may not feel like an ending at all. It feels like authority becoming more local. Distances becoming harder to cross, an old title surviving after the power behind them has weakened. After the western provinces fall under Sasanian influence, Kushan rulers continue across Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. Historians often describe this later phase as the era of the Little Kushans, though the label can make these kings seem less important than they were. They mint coins in the names of rulers whose exact sequence remains disputed. Some may belong to branches of the old royal family. Others may be regional commanders who inherit the symbols of Kushan authority because those symbols command respect. The coins reveal continuity and decay. Later rulers imitate the designs of Kanishka, Huvishka, and Vasudeva. The king still stands before an altar. Deities still occupy the reverse, yet details become simplified. Inscriptions grow harder to read, and images are copied by engravers who may no longer understand every feature of the original design. A crown becomes a rough line. A divine attribute becomes an abstract mark. The coin remains recognizable because familiarity helps trade, but its visual language slowly loses precision. This is not merely poor craftsmanship, it reflects a political world breaking into smaller zones. An imperial mint can employ skilled die cutters, maintain metal standards, and distribute currency across distant provinces. A regional ruler works with fewer resources and a narrower audience. His coins need only be accepted in the markets under his control. As central authority fades, money becomes more local, and the once unified image of Kushan kingship fragments into many imperfect echoes. Cities experience the change unevenly. Some decline when trade routes shift or military protection disappears. Warehouses empty, monumental construction slows, wealthy families move elsewhere. Irrigation channels may still function, but repairs become harder when regional governments cannot organize labor on the same scale. Other cities adapt and remain active under new rulers. Taxila, Mathura, and centers in Gandhara do not simply die with the empire. They continue as religious, artistic, and commercial communities, though their political loyalties change. Buddhist monasteries also survive, at least for a time. Their networks are broader than any one dynasty. Pilgrims still visit stupas. Donors continue to commission images and inscriptions. Monks preserve teachings that had travelled along Kushan roads. Yet monasteries depend on land, gifts, security, and nearby populations. When local economies shrink or warfare interrupts travel, support weakens. Some institutions are abandoned gradually, others are rebuilt by later patrons. The religious landscape carries the memory of Kushan patronage long after Kushan officials disappear. In the north and west, the political situation becomes even more complex. Kushano-Sasanian rulers govern former Kushan lands under Iranian influence, but they too face new pressures. During the 4th century, groups often associated with the Kidarites move into Central Asia and Bactria. Their origins remain uncertain, and scholars still debate how they relate to later peoples known collectively as the Huns. They adopt Kushan titles and coin designs, presenting themselves as heirs to the authority they replace. Once again, conquerors understand that the Kushan name still has value. This repeated borrowing makes the final stages difficult to reconstruct. A coin may resemble a Kushan issue but belong to a Sasanian governor, a Kidarite ruler, or a small local dynasty. Names are abbreviated, chronologies overlap, political control changes faster than artistic conventions, the evidence remains incomplete, and no single explanation fully accounts for every transition. What survives suggests that the empire does not leave one clean successor. It leaves a crowded field of powers competing to inherit its roads, symbols, and prestige. Farther east, new Indian dynasties rise. By the 4th century, the Gupta Empire expands across much of northern India. Gupta rulers establish their own powerful political and cultural system. Though they also inherit a world already transformed by centuries of Kushan rule, their gold coinage has distinct Indian forms. Yet the broader practice of using royal gold currency in northern India had been strengthened under the Kushans. Artistic traditions, trade connections, and religious institutions continue across the dynastic divide. Political replacement does not erase cultural inheritance. For ordinary people, these changes are experienced locally. A farmer may pay tax to a different lord but cultivate the same field. A merchant may accept a new coin modelled on an old one. A sculptor may work for patrons whose language and titles have changed while using techniques learned from earlier workshops. A family living near a monastery may continue attending festivals without knowing that historians will later describe their age as one of imperial collapse. Civilizations rarely disappear at the speed of the maps drawn to represent them. Even the royal name persists after its original meaning has blurred. Kushan becomes a claim, a memory, and a political costume worn by later rulers. This is one reason the empire is so hard to place within a simple story of rise and fall. Its institutions fragment, but its forms remain useful. Its conquerors imitate it. Its religious networks continue beyond it. Its roads are absorbed into other systems. The empire ends, but its pieces refuse to disappear together. By the time the last minor Kushan rulers fade from the record, the world that created them has changed. Rome is no longer the stable western giant it once seemed. The Han dynasty has fallen. The Sasanians dominate Iran. New Central Asian confederations move through Bactria. The Guptas reshape northern India. The great chain of Kushan cities no longer answers to one crown. Yet the silence of their final disappearance should not be mistaken for insignificance. The Kushans fade quietly because so much of what they built is absorbed rather than destroyed. Their empire breaks apart, but the connections it strengthened continue to guide merchants, pilgrims, artists, and conquerors. The kingdom vanishes from political maps while remaining embedded in the civilizations that follow. The Kushan Empire disappears from political maps, but its influence remains scattered across an enormous landscape. It survives in monastery ruins above the valleys of Pakistan, in red sandstone figures from Mathura, in grey schist sculptures from Gandhara, in gold coins found far from the mints that produced them, and in Buddhist texts preserved beyond the mountains. Its legacy is difficult to summarize because the Kushans leave no single institution comparable to Roman law, no surviving court chronicle, and no modern nation that claims an uncomplicated descent from them. What they leave instead is a pattern of connections. Their most important achievement may have been the creation of a durable bridge between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. Earlier conquerors crossed the Hindu Kush, and traders had travelled through the region for centuries, but the Kushans ruled both sides of the mountains as parts of one political system. Bactria, Kabul, Gandhara, the Indus Basin, and Mathura became linked by royal authority, coinage, military protection, and commercial interest. These connections continued after the empire fragmented because later rulers found them too valuable to abandon. The roads strengthened under Kushan rule remained routes for trade, invasion, pilgrimage, and migration. Sasanian officials, Central Asian confederations, Indian dynasties, Buddhist monks, and merchant caravans all inherited portions of the same geography. The empire had demonstrated that the mountain corridors were not merely barriers between civilizations. They could form the center of a civilization in their own right. Kushan coinage influenced later rulers across Central and South Asia. The use of heavy gold coins helped establish a prestigious model of royal currency in northern India. Gupta kings later produced celebrated gold issues expressing their own political and religious ideals. But they operated in an economic world where Kushan gold had already circulated widely. In Bactria and Afghanistan, Kushano-Sasanian and Kidarite rulers copied Kushan images and titles. Even distorted imitations reveal the strength of the original visual language. A king standing before an altar remained understandable long after the dynasty that introduced the image had weakened. The art of the Kushan age leaves an even more visible inheritance. Gandharan workshops developed sacred imagery combining local, Iranian, Indian, and Hellenistic elements. The Buddha appears in robes whose folds recall classical sculpture, yet the meaning of the image belongs to an expanding Buddhist world. In Mathura, artists create a different vision, warmer stone, powerful frontal bodies, and forms deeply rooted in Indian tradition. These were not rival styles separated by an imperial border. They flourished within the same broad Kushan realm. As Buddhist imagery moved through Central Asia, artists adapted these forms again. Cave temples, painted walls, clay figures, and manuscripts in the Tarim Basin preserved traces of Gandharan influence while developing distinct local traditions. Farther east, Chinese artists transformed the image of the Buddha according to new materials and aesthetics. No sculpture can be traced along a single unbroken path from a Kushan workshop to East Asia, but the broader movement is unmistakable. The empire helped create conditions in which sacred images could travel, be recognized, and be remade. Buddhism itself becomes the Kushan's most far-reaching legacy. Kanishka's later reputation as a great Buddhist patron may contain exaggeration, but the association reflects a genuine historical transformation. Under Kushan rule, monasteries expanded along commercial routes, merchants financed religious communities, and translators carried texts through Central Asia. Mahayana ideas gained new audiences. The Buddha appeared on royal currency. Pilgrims found a chain of institutions extending toward the eastern oases. Centuries after the last powerful Kushan king, Chinese pilgrims still travelled through lands marked by their monuments. They recorded stories of stupas, relics, monasteries, and rulers whose histories had already begun to merge with legend. Some sites associated with Kanishka were rebuilt repeatedly, suggesting that sacred importance outlived political control. A dynasty could disappear while a pilgrimage destination continued drawing people from distant countries. The Kushan contribution to religious history extends beyond Buddhism. Their coins provide rare evidence for Iranian gods and cults whose written traditions are poorly preserved. They reveal how divine figures could be reinterpreted across languages and regions. Their support for religious diversity helped Buddhist, Jain, Brahmanical, Iranian, and local traditions flourish within overlapping spaces. This was not modern tolerance based on equal rights, but an imperial method suited to a multicultural realm. Its consequences were nevertheless profound. Trade remains central to their memory. The Kushans did not control all commerce between China and Rome, and the phrase Silk Road can exaggerate the unity of ancient exchange. Yet their territory formed one of the great junctions of Eurasian movement: Chinese lacquer, Mediterranean glass, Indian ivory, Central Asian horses, Roman gold, spices, textiles, and gemstones met within their cities. The objects found at Bagram are not simply evidence of luxury. They demonstrate the reach of human networks maintained through risk, negotiation, and repeated exchange. Ideas followed the same pattern: artistic techniques, astronomical knowledge, medical traditions, religious teachings, scripts, and political symbols moved through Kushan territory. They rarely travelled unchanged. Each community translated what it received. This process makes cultural influence difficult to measure. A shape in a sculpture, a divine title on a coin, or a word in a translated manuscript may preserve the memory of a journey whose travellers remain unknown. The Kushans also challenged the habit of treating ancient history as the story of isolated civilizations. Rome, Persia, India, and China are often described separately, as though deserts and mountains sealed them into different worlds. The Kushan Empire reveals the weakness of that picture. Its rulers operate between all of them. Their wealth depends on distant demand. Their art draws on multiple traditions. Their religious patronage affects communities far beyond their borders. Their identity is formed through migration rather than rooted permanence. This may explain why they were forgotten. Histories organized around modern nations often push the Kushans to the margins. In Chinese records, they appear as Western peoples and foreign rulers. In Indian history, they are one dynasty among many. In Iranian history, they stand beyond the eastern frontier. In classical studies, they appear mainly when Roman objects or trade are discussed. Yet the Kushans were not marginal in their own world. They occupied the center of the connections joining those histories together. Their empire was never perfectly unified, and its achievements should not be romanticized. Conquest involved violence, taxation burdened communities, and control of trade benefited rulers and elites. Safe passage for one caravan could depend on the defeat or displacement of another population. The same roads that carried monks also carried soldiers. The same gold that funded monasteries paid armies. The Kushan world was creative because it was powerful, and its power was built through both cooperation and force. Still, what survives suggests an unusual imperial talent. The Kushans rarely demanded that the many peoples under their authority become identical. They ruled by combining rather than simplifying. Greek letters could write an Iranian language. A Central Asian king could honor Shiva. A Buddhist teacher could appear on gold currency. Roman glass could rest beside Chinese lacquer in an Afghan storeroom. None of these objects lost its origin entirely, but each gained a new meaning through contact. The Forgotten Kingdom did not control one narrow road carrying silk from east to west. It controlled something larger, a changing zone where civilizations met, traded, argued, worshipped, and transformed one another. The Kushans disappeared because the political system holding that zone together eventually fractured. Their legacy survived because the movement they encouraged could not be contained by any one empire. The mountains remain after every dynasty. Snow still settles across the high passes, and the rivers still descend toward valleys where cities have risen, fallen, and risen again. The old caravan tracks have faded beneath modern roads, fields, borders, and settlements, but the shape of the land has not forgotten them. There are still only so many ways through the Hindu Kush, only so many places where water can be found, and only so many valleys where travellers can rest before continuing east or west. The Kushans once stood within that geography and briefly made it their own. They arrived as migrants pushed from a distant homeland, crossed the steppe, entered Bactria, and learned to govern a world older than their dynasty. They inherited ruined Greek cities, Iranian traditions, Indian religions, and roads leading toward China. They did not preserve these things unchanged. They gathered them, used them, and passed them onward. Their kings are now little more than names stamped into gold. Their capitals lie beneath later cities or in fields where broken walls emerge from the earth. Their language survives in inscriptions few people can read. The enormous stupa associated with Kanishka has disappeared, and the caravans that once approached it no longer cast their shadows across the plain. Yet disappearance is never complete. A face carved in Gandhara still carries the memory of several worlds. A Chinese translation preserves teachings spoken far to the west. A coin found in the soil still shows a king standing beside sacred fire. These objects remain because someone once carried them, buried them, protected them, copied them, or gave them meaning. Civilizations often seem permanent while they exist. Their borders appear fixed, their rulers absolute, and their roads essential. Then the center weakens, the map changes, and what looked like an empire becomes a collection of fragments. The Kushans remind us that fragments can travel farther than monuments. A kingdom may be forgotten while its ideas continue moving through people who never know its name. And somewhere above the old valleys, the wind still crosses the passes. It moves over ruined monasteries, dry riverbeds, fields, and crowded modern towns. It follows the same corridors once travelled by merchants, soldiers, pilgrims, and displaced families. The empire is gone, but the road remains, carrying memory through the mountains long after the last Kushan king has vanished.